Fair to find. Thank you so much, Marcia, for having me. Mr. Beckers, hi. Good to be on the program. Thank you so much. Look forward to a good program. I think you should be quite concerned. It seems to me that this is a document which will inform the legal document that is eventually brought within the ambit of your constitution. And so you should be very, very concerned, especially too, as I'm told, your parliament spent quite some time debating the same. So this is a document which all Barbadians should be paying close attention to. Certainly, uh, certainly it was not adopted without rationale, you know. So this is a document which all citizens should pay close attention to. And may I just say that Christians in Barbados should remember that they are not second-class citizens. That as a citizen, irrespective of your religious belief, you have a right, and should I say, an obligation to understand what is happening to your country and to take an active role in whatever changes are planned for your country. We need to get rid of the fear, and we also need to get rid of the thinking that has been cast upon us that we are second class citizens. We reject that absolutely and totally. Is dead right. And I want to commend him and Family Faith Freedom, Dr. Recognize the danger, spelled it out quite accurately. What alerted us, you see, in about 2006, 2007, what alerted us to the danger is just how Canada has changed. Now, Canada was possibly the first, or let me be careful, one of the first Commonwealth countries which adopted a Charter of Rights. And
Mm-hmm.
this was done under Pierre Trudeau. Now, if you recall, Pierre Trudeau was a very liberal gentleman. So, what happened? I remember that we had a Canadian professor, well, she later became a professor, who came and assisted us, helping us to understand how the Charter of Rights changed Canada. And it was quite an eye opening session. And it was that which helped us to understand what our country would have been in for had not certain limitations been placed on the Charter. Mr. Beckers was quite right in identifying some of those red flags. May I say that even just having sexual orientation by itself, if there was nothing else, but the other words are also of concern. But sexual orientation is one of those phrases that is just loaded with, loaded with, can I say, in the present context, which
Mm-hmm. Yes.
would provide ammunition for a court to lead the country down a certain pathway. That pathway would see you, I don't even say ending up, but along that pathway, you would have same sex marriage. You would have a conflict in rights. Mr. Beckers is quite right in mentioning religious liberty. You'd have freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, parental rights. All of those rights would likely then be redefined within the context of the normalization of
Mm-hmm.
homosexuality, which is what the acceptance of sexual sexual orientation does when it's placed within a document such as a charter. So kudos to Mr. Beckers and others within the Bayesian society who have recognized the danger. I would rather for Mr. Beckers to take that question, but let me just say, if constitutional change is being and it is anticipated, then you have every reason to be concerned. That's firstly. Secondly, if constitutional change was not even being contemplated, the fact that the government has accepted such a document gives you every reason for concern. What Mr. Beckers said a while ago, in that this document, even if not placed within your constitution, will strengthen the hands of those who want to push certain things within the Barbadian society, particularly upon our children. There's a case, in Canada, I think a year or so ago, of a father who was sent to prison for 6 months because he refused to call his daughter by the names that, and to refer to her as in the masculine, as she wanted to be referred to. And so he was jailed. Let me tell you, these things have long range impact. And, so it is not enough to take or it is not wise. It would be foolish to think that because it's not in the Constitution, and maybe I'd say not yet, it's not in the Constitution, that one should sit back and drink sorrel. No, no, no. No, it's the danger is out. The danger is clear. There's a clear and present danger for all to see. Book written by Professor Janet Epp Buckingham called Withering Rights. Let's call it a booklet. She really described in that book, she had cases, that different court cases, and how they had been interpreted. Withering rights. Now that made us wake up. Withering rights. So that first, so the whole concept that interpretation of rights could be changed by our charter. That's one basic principle. Secondly, with whom when you adopt a charter, which institution has the say over the interpretation of this charter? Does final power rest with the Parliament? Parliament shall make laws for the good of society. That is in our constitution, Jamaican constitution. That is in the present Barbadian constitution. Or does it rest with a judiciary? In the long run, that is some of the questions. How would this affect, how would this charter affect our rights? How would it affect the institution of marriage? And I can tell you, although some of the words that Mr. Beckers has picked up were not in our charter, we realize that it was worded in such a way that it would allow some of these things, including same-sex marriage, to be inserted, it would give foundation for a court to eventually, maybe over a series of cases, to eventually impose same-sex marriage on the society. So a couple of things we asked the Parliament to do at that time. And as I said, those words, all the words, none of the words that Mr. Beckers mentioned were or thankfully are in our charter, but it had no parameters, it had no
Okay.
limitations, and we realized that in the present context, with how the Canadian charter was being interpreted, that there was a lot of danger concerning the interpretation of that document. So one of the things we asked the court, with the parliament to do, and we're grateful that they accepted it, they preserve laws relating to sexual offenses. That would include the present Bogle law. They define marriage. They preserve laws preserving the status of the unborn child, and they preserve laws relating to, oh gosh, it's even in terms of expression, like pornography, that type of thing, because your laws that ban that type of thing, because you recognize that when a charter is that wide, that all sorts of rights can be claimed. So thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
the Jamaican Parliament accepted our submissions in those regards. We're grateful for that. And yet it was not as bad as what is currently being proposed, or what is currently in this charter, which is before the people of Barbados. Let me just say that every country, every family, every individual will have a worldview, a philosophy that leads, a philosophy that guides. So it's left to the Barbadian society to choose which philosophy, which framework, within which framework your new charter will be interpreted. You must see the dangers and choose. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem as if, well, put it this way, you must look carefully at the clash of rights that's happening in other countries. Mr. Baker spoke about just speaking and so on, but just the very act of wearing a cross, a pendant, a cross,
Mm.
has been an issue in England,
Oh.
you know. And so you need to look carefully at what at those activities, maybe, which you adorn with the word rights. Do you really want to? Do you really want to give certain activities the adornment of the word rights? Do you really want to categorize certain things as rights? What do you want to categorize as rights? Because whatever you categorize as rights will rule the roost.
Mm-hmm.
So you must look at the outcome and decide what you want to categorize as rights. Don't be unwise. Look at where these countries, look at where these countries are now. Is that where
Mm-hmm.
you want to go? And Barbados must decide that for itself. At the time, yes, we do have a group called Lawyers Christian Fellowship. Uh, I'm no longer president, as president for a while, but it comprised and comprises Christian attorneys who are willing to stand up for the witness of Jesus Christ within the legal profession in particular, but within the nation generally. And so when we realized the possible implications of what was happening, we thought it was our duty to warn the nation of of the pending changes. And I tell you, unlike what's happening in Barbados, this document had been sitting there for years.
Mm.
The process had been going on for like 13 years or something like that. It took that
Wow.
time. Yeah, it took that time for us to awaken, because you see, during that time, lots of changes had gone on in the world when they first started. And if we had made those submissions when the whole process just had just begun, we would have been dismissed out of hand because things were not yet apparent. It
Mm-hmm.
took all of that time not only for us to awaken, and thank God we awaken just at the last minute, um, but it took that time for things to begin developing in other countries, in
Mhm.
particular Canada. You know, we're able to see
Mm.
the impact of their charter on Canada. And so from that, we were able to learn a lesson. So thanks to the lawyers, Christian Fellowship is still there. Now I'm more active participant in a group called Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society, and we have made certain things a priority within that coalition. So yeah, we're still there, and we give God thanks. To say to Barbadians that don't be fooled by thinking that all rights will be given equal say within the sphere of rights. What we have seen in other countries is that invariably rights relating to sexual orientation and or stroke secularism take precedence over fundamental, what one would normally regard as being fundamental human rights. So don't be fooled.
Mhm.
Um, you know, the space that exists, it doesn't allow for, it doesn't allow for all philosophies. All philosophies will not be dominant, will not have the same level of influence. It will not. It, it,
Mhm.
it, it hasn't happened, and it will not happen. So
Mhm.
this change will place Christian principles on the back foot. I just want Barbadians to understand that. What you thought you had, you will now have to fight for, and only by the grace of God that you will get it.
Mhm.
You know, it will place Christian principles on the back foot. Let me also make another point, maybe the last point, because I did tell you I had to go. Let me also make another point. Lawyers lawyers are essential to this whole process. And I commend Mr. Beckers, and I know there are others, in terms of seeing the danger and warning the population. They are watchmen because they have, with their
Mm.
knowledge and their expertise, they're able to read these documents and understand the implications and communicate to the ordinary man in the street the implications. That's one. But secondly, what will the people do after having had that knowledge? We would not have had the impact that we did if certain church leaders had not stood with us. I can tell you that. It was amazing to me that when we went to Parliament, Parliament was full of people. I think I remember one of the leading newspapers in our country the following day had a headline: "The church goes to Parliament." You know, when we got there, pamphlets were being distributed. People were there distributing pamphlets. Press conferences were called. You know, all sorts of things. So lawyers are essential, but there is need for mobilization by the people who care and the people who see the danger to the society. However, even if that doesn't happen, the lawyer still has a duty and a responsibility to sound the alarm to the nation. Listen, I don't know that the 13 years is to be taken as being of any virtue. But what it does suggest is that a document such as this ought to be given time. You know, the people ought to be given time to understand the implications, to digest the implications, and to even, yeah, it's not, it should not be done in a hurry. Should not be a hurry come up document. And the fact is too, in terms of the COVID, really and truly, I feel it for the Barbadian people, because we all are under the threat of COVID, and that places just certain limitations on us. First, the COVID brings a sense of fear of the future. Full stop. COVID by itself, people are in a state of uncertainty. The big thing is, we don't know what tomorrow will bring. That's firstly. And so, with that, within that environment, ought government to be doing all of this fundamental change within that environment? Listen to me, I have no problems with your country becoming a republic. Congratulations to you. And our government has announced plans. I can tell you, our government has since announced plans to go that way, and it has been considering that way for many, many years. Every prime minister we have had for the last 20 years has announced intentions to make Jamaica a republic. But also now our government is looking at constitutional change for next year. So maybe yourself and Mr. Beckers will have to come and help us next year, because I don't know if a similar thing will not be done in Jamaica. But I just think that such a fundamental change as a charter in particular, and maybe even a republic, I query whether all of this whether this was a good time to have done all of this with the threat of COVID hanging over our heads. And I say our because as a people, we are people of the region. We are Caribbean people. What affects one affects the other. And so I use the word our. Was this a good time for Prime Minister Mia Mottley to have introduced these changes um, to the people of Barbados? Thank you, ma'am. May I be allowed
Thank
to leave? Well, may I salute His Excellency, Dr. Ferdinand Nichols. I salute you, sir. Yes, I have to leave. Firstly, I just want to say that you all have the ability, the capability, and the manpower there. You have it there. And as I said before, I want to commend Mr. Beckers and others like Dr. Evelyn, who has done such a remarkable job. Faith Family Freedom in
yes.
Barbados, they
Freedom.
have done such a
Yeah.
remarkable job over the last couple of years. But there's something I read this morning, and maybe I just leave it with us all. And somebody just sent this. It says 75 years ago, during the Nuremberg trials, judges asked Hermann Göring, Hitler's right hand, how they made Germany accept all the madness. He said, the only thing a government needs to turn people into slaves is fear. If you can find something to make them afraid, you can make them do whatever you want. So that's something for us all to ponder.
Yes.
So our first enemy is fear. We need to fight fear. All
Mhm.
right.